Okay, so we are live and a very warm good evening to all of our viewers. Welcome to today's weekly career class, which is on the topic careers in food technology. And today we have with us Mr. Vikram Singh. Mr. Vikram Singh, he has completed his post-graduation in M.Sc. Food Technology from Central Food Technology Research Institute. Mr. Vikram comes with over 15 years of work experience in this space, and he has worked for brands such as Dabur India Limited, Kraft Foods Group, Kerry Asia Pacific, and currently is working as Regional Innovation and NPD Manager in Young Brands. And he's also leading the KFC Innovations team in Asia. So a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Vikram, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you.
And so to all of our viewers, we'll be doing this session in a Q&A style primarily, and we'll also have questions. We'll also invite questions from your end, which Mr. Vikram will answer. And there are also some other things that Vikram would like to show to you.
Okay.
So I think we can begin now, right?
All right.
Okay. So Mr. Vikram, first of all, I would like to thank you for coming here on our platform to educate children and students on food technology. I think a lot of people may not be aware of the opportunities that are available in this space. So this would be very great on your part to help us. So my first question would be, sir, could you start with telling us about your educational and professional journey and how did you get where you currently are?
So I want to start with thanking you for this invitation. I'm humbled to be able to be part of this forum and share my know-how actually. And just to begin with, I was born in Shillong in Meghalaya. That's northeast of India, way back. This is in the 1900s, so I'm like a fossil at this point. And did my schooling there up to my graduation. But everything has been in the science field. My graduation was in biochemistry, or biotechnology, sorry. And from there, had an opportunity to do something called food technology in my master's, which was in Mysore. And for that, there was an entrance exam. You had to have some form of a rank system. I think it still exists to this day. And from my master's, I think the break point was when I got my first job in a pickle industry in a place called Zahirabad, which is like 85 kilometers from Hyderabad, right? So in the pickle industry, I went in as a quality executive, titration, checking the grade of cucumbers that was coming in and how it's being pickled. So that was a stint of about a year in Zahirabad, wherein I learned quality assurance, also production. Then after that, I moved to Bangalore. The management wanted me to be in Bangalore because we had 2 units. There, I started to learn what product development is and was given the opportunity to have my own system. So it was just me and one more person, and we used to run product development. And that's where I fell in love with research and development. And ever since then, I've been in the research and development field all throughout my life. And I worked in the pickle industry with the Global Green Company for about 3.5 years, moved to Dabur as senior scientist, handling the food service sector. Now, there's a retail side and there's a food service side. Food service side deals with all the hotels, restaurants, etc. And I worked there for about 1.5 years, developing ketchups, canned pineapples. There's something called capsico, which is like Tabasco, that we developed there as well. From then on, it was a paradigm shift. From fruits and vegetables, I went into the dairy world. And that was the first time I had gotten my international stint with a company called Kraft Foods. And I was based out of Manama in Bahrain in the Middle East. And I think my entire understanding of R&D and deep dive into that system is at Kraft. And I spent a good 4.5 years in Manama. Well, the Center of Excellence was based in Chicago. There's a portion made in Munich in Germany. So I had to travel a lot. And the manufacturing plant is Australia. So I had to travel the length and breadth of the globe, making cheese for what is known as GCC or the Gulf countries and Europe, right? So good learning there for 4.5 years, roughly. And with time, there's, you move up in career, and was sent to, or I volunteered to go for as an expat to be based out of Philippines. So 2012 to 2014, I was there in Philippines managing the business purely from an R&D perspective and what was known as value optimization or productivity for Southeast Asia, again in the cheese area. So 2 years in Manila, a lot of travel in and around that zone. From there, I moved up to 2014, and my kids were growing up. The schooling was important. So that put me a stop in what I was doing, and I looked for an option to be outside of Philippines. And that's where Singapore happened. And when I came into Singapore, I was there for a brief stint in the ingredient industry. Again, trying to see where technical and sales attributes can go into selling dairy components into all the customers and stuff. So that was about a year stint there. And I won't say life was smooth. It's not easy when you have a new role coming up. And then Yum approached, and I moved from dairy to the chicken world. And I started to work for Yum, for KFC Asia. And I now, since 2015 onwards, till to this day, I work for Yum under the KFC brand. So Yum has 4 brands at this point. Like, for example, KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and there's a company called Habit Burger. I look after KFC. I look after the innovation platform for KFC Asia. So a little bit about KFC Asia. The length and breadth of Asia, except for China, except for India and Thailand. So we have 14 markets that I look after. And in this, what do? It's just not frying chicken. It's the science that goes behind how do you manage meat and poultry from a supply chain of view, getting the right product into the system in every market. It's very diverse. Plus, once you have the raw material or the right ingredients, what do you do with that product? So the innovation starts in every market, in different formats, in different styles, and still staying true to KFC, a fried chicken company, right? So this is what I've been doing for the last 7+ years. So how many years experience do I have? 2002. I think it's about 19 odd years, I think. I've not counted. I lost count, actually. So this is my journey so far. Yeah. And it's a roller coaster ride. And you learn that. I think if you ask me a question, what are my learnings through this journey? One is, if I look at myself, I have been very absorbing, like a sponge. So I'm very adaptive. I can change from fruits and vegetables to dairy to chicken with a blink of an eye and not stressed over it. So I can do that. So I'm adaptable. So I think that's very key, which I'll share later on why that's so important. I think the second one is emotionally. You have to be stable in the sense there's no outbursts or massive reactions, good or bad, rough or stress or good times. You have to manage that. I think when you start to manage that, then anywhere you're placed, any situation, you're able to think it through properly and make the right calls, make the right decisions. Yes, some decisions will not go in your favor, but again, you'll wake up and there will be decisions will go with the favor for you and your family. So, there's always a roller coaster, right? So with that, if there are any questions, I pass it on to you.
Okay, so now we might want to dive deep into food technology itself. Could you tell us what is food technology really? If you were to explain this to a class 11th or 12th student.
Right. So I thought a lot about this actually. How do you explain? Can go very scientific, can go very base minimum. Now, what is food? Anything that you ingest, that you eat, just not for humans, but for pets, for insects. It's any living organism that's having ingestion to be alive. That's food, depending on which species. So that's food. Any technology that goes into preparing that food unless it's had natural in the world. If you have to prepare for it in terms of fermentation, in terms of cooking, for example, that's the technology. Now, when you club those two in, you have food science, for example, wherein you're talking about proteins, carbohydrates, fats, those interaction and how they will interact. I'll give you a little example. A simple thing in the kitchen of taking raw ingredients like spices or cabbage or chicken or let's see, and you put oil into it, you put the spices into it, you're cooking it, you're changing the chemistry of that product, so you get all the flavors coming off. And then you're going to have the chicken, which is mixed with other spices before, with salt, etc. And then you're cooking that together. Now that whole thing, a combination of it, is to give you a final product, right? Now that is a process, that in itself is a technology, that in itself is an industry, a portion of the industry. Now, food technology has many segments. It's just not about the food, it's also about equipments. You need equipment to cook, like pressure cooker, for example. So large scale, small scale, depending on where you are and what you want to do. Another aspect is, one is equipment, one is the ingredients you have. And the other third portion, which I think is key also, is making sure all of them are within food safety parameters, which is a large portion in the quality aspect, right? Now, in any industry, when it's coming to food, there is a regulation in the government, which also is another career, if you ask me. And there's a team of people who are auditors or quality assurance people who would or should and could manage that within that parameters, so that the end consumer has a safe product and which will not harm anyone. So to encompass it all, food technology is any technology that is used to create food, to extend shelf life, for example, to make sure the food is available in a safe format. That in its entirety is food technology. Any questions? No?
All right, sir. So no questions at the moment.
Okay.
So moving on to the next question, what would you say is the future or the scope of this field in India?
Okay. Back in 1999, when I did my master's, there was CFTRI, there was something called UDCT, there were a couple of like NDRI dairy, and there was Jadavpur food technology courses available in and around in India, DFRL as well, to a certain extent. That's all we had known at that time, and nobody used to talk much, actually. It was more of a risky area to be getting into, right? Now, if you look at today, almost every state has some form of food science or food technology or biochemistry that is in the system. That's one. Two, I think the government is waking up and there's a lot of funding available. Projects are available. You see a lot of movement in the agri world where there's subsidies from the government for farmers, for small processing plants, or even large scale, where there's equipment subsidy, for example, or contract farming that's really big, that's picking up. So I think since then to now, within this 20 years or so, massive change. And with the likes of, and India is a startup heaven, actually, to a certain extent. You see a lot of people, I can give an example of Wow Momo. You must have seen Momos everywhere.
Yes.
I can't remember his name, but his initial investment was 30,000 rupees, in that range. In dollar term, that's what, maybe what, $300 roughly, or $300 roughly. That's the amount it took for him to set up a Wow Momo, which is massive, and you can see across India now. So the opportunity is immense. It depends on what you want to do, what you believe in. So India, I think it's booming, much like Asia. See, the Western world is kind of, I won't say plateau, but it's more well established. Here in Asia, it's wide open. There are many small scale that's mushrooming all over the place and fairly doing well. India I think it's booming at this point. I would say the future is super bright.
All right, thank you, sir. So, moving on to the next question, which is, what are the opportunities or the top job roles that are available in this field?
Okay, I was going to cover that in my presentation, but I'll give you in short.
Sure.
Top jobs, it all depends on you, on how you take your education. That's one. It gives you a stepping stone. So if you do your master's in food technology or your PhD, you can go into pure science and do research, or you can get into do your MBA and do your business administration and run a business and enter a food industry like Nestle, Pepsi, what the likes. Or you can get to a technical role and become a technical head. I'll explain that further later on. Having said that, the top roles in this, you can go to the range of, in a purely technical sense, vice president or president of an organization. So you're actually leading the entire technical arm of the organization or your own organization. If you have a little bit of MBA or management exposure, like you've learned the ranks of just not R&D, but you have marketing experience, sales experience, HR, finance. If you can groom yourself or take those opportunities to study on the side or on the job, that will groom you to become CEO. Now, top level, you can't be more than a CEO, because once you do become a CEO, your end goal is becoming a board of directors. So you're going to become a chairman, for example. So you can, sky's the limit if you ask me. But then you have to have those values. Some are born with it, some earn through it through sheer hard work. And not everyone reaches the CEO level. I know you would want to, but not everyone does. But for those who aspire to be one, you need to absorb just not technical know-how, but you also need to have financial background or experience, operational experience, understanding of people. Psychologically, it's very important as well. So these three areas, I think, in a gist, should take you to the higher rungs of in an organization. So these are like top jobs. You could be factory managers, etc. And top jobs, again, in India, international exposure, these all counts as well.
All right, sir. So I think you could take us through your presentation. Sir has a presentation to show us, so wherein
Okay.
we will cover the top job roles, right?
Yeah, I can walk you through what career looks like. Okay.
Right.
All right, give me a second here. Career in food. Okay. Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, we can see it.
1 second. Presentation mode. Okay, there you go. All right, so career in food. It's a very simple slide here. What I've done is, there are many ways of explaining this. I put this up in a way, if I was a student, how would I want to hear? Because I didn't get a chance to hear this from back then. And I think I've worked in FMCG, or fast moving consumer goods. Then I worked in the retail industry. Then I worked in a B2B, which is selling dairy ingredients for business to business. And then now I'm in the QSR, or quick service restaurant. So versatile, diverse, broad, right? So I asked myself, what would I want to share in the presentation talk about career? Now, there are many things you can see on YouTube or Google it. There'll be a list of jobs and careers that a food technology folk can apply for or aspire for. Now, if I have to put all of them just through what I've seen, and this is purely me, is I want to divide them into core, that is food science or food technology. Categories is basically what do you do with that? It has two things. The core is food science, which if you do food science, that's your core, that's your understanding, and your level of technical prowess will define that. Okay, that's food science. Now, categories are put into technical and management. Now, when you want to go technical field, it's like PhDs, for example. You go to universities to become professors, etc., dean, and then you build a whole, and you lead the food science field of a university anywhere in the world. So that's as high as you can go, and then you become principal, or you lead the entire university. So it's a very educational focus. That's technical. Now, technical can also mean another thing. Should you join a company or organization that manufactures food, for example, Lay's, and you're making chips, for example. Now, when you join in a technical field, it's either QA or R&D to start with. Now, you could be product developing, having new products like Lay's barbecue, Lay's lemon, Lay's this, Lay's that, and then that's your arm of the work. Or you could be in quality assurance or quality executive. That's your starting point, where you're actually checking if the Lay's barbecue is within the set parameters, is food safe, etc., etc. So that's very technical. And usually, anyone coming out from food science would fall into this category, and that's where you start off with. Your work experience starts with the basic QA, R&D, new product development, right? And usually we're reporting into an R&D manager or QA manager. Now, while you're doing that, you have a choice. You want to stay true to the technical field and head the QA department or R&D department. Like myself, I've stuck to R&D. And with me working in Yum, there's one of my feet is actually going into management, and it's handling both. It's a mix of those two. Now, that's technical, right? Now, the other category which I mentioned, management, is when this technical know-how is mixed with MBA, for example, or mixed with engineering, or mixed with some IT, computer science, etc. Because digital is big now. Now, when you put those two together, what happens now is you are not a pure food science category. So you may not be working in supply, in R&D or on quality assurance or quality lab, etc. Now you are into understanding operations. Your understanding of supply chain, where to get ingredients, etc. There's another one called business development, which functions like a sales guy, but it's more techno sales. You technically know the product because you have a food science background, but then you also know how to sell the product. So there's a lot of opportunity there in business development. And then with MBA also comes, you could be a part of marketing now. And marketing is always the forefront, is one of the pillars for any organization, because you have to, how you portray yourself as a product or, as an image. So there's a pros and cons. There are different type of people that suit technical, they suit management. Now, that's core categories, and now that's function. Now, remember I was talking about technical, you got QA, you can go nutrition, R&D, for example. So that's area. And this other arm that I mentioned here as auditors and chef. Now, QA experience adds into auditing suppliers, factories, etc. So there are organizations like DNV, and do you have what's this NSF, where they audit. There's a group of companies that has lots of auditors that go around the world auditing factories and suppliers and approving them. I've also mentioned one thing called chef. Now, chef is, if you say you're food science to the larger world, oh, you're a chef, they'll think you're a chef, which is fine. And with food science, with your intricate know-how of molecules and proteins and fats, and the chef's know-how of how to mix ingredients to make a very tasty product or run a restaurant. So I've got a one feet there as well. So you could also be a chef and run your own restaurants or work in a restaurant industry, etc. Right? So that's very technical then. Now, when you're talking about management, which I mentioned about operations, you do your MBA, supply chain, business development. Now, here's an area where you're branching off, and usually these are the ones which you are the ones who are hungry to be CEO. Now, like I said, not everyone can be CEO. So I'm not saying if you're a QA, you won't become a CEO. If you're a QA head and you pick up management traits on the job, you are going up for climbing the ladder. But if you stay true to only just technical, your career will be longer, but it'll be very stable, because the supply of technical know-how is limited in this world, and it's a resource for an organization, right? Stop me for any questions anytime, because I just have 2 slides.
All right. So, sir, could you go back to the previous slide? Yeah,
yes.
I have one question regarding the functions part. So, could
Right.
you tell us more about what is the work that is entailed in, let's say, the job of a QA
Okay.
or a
Now,
nutritionist and so on.
right. Now, if you look at QA, quality assurance. Now, I'll give an example through an example, right? You have something called HACCP, HACCP. Now, an industry, the process line is built to ensure HACCP certified. So it's a zero defect program. It's completely for food safety reasons. Now, QA, there will be several checks or critical control points. There'll be critical control points within the process. Now, who's going to manage that, or who's going to make sure that those critical control points are met so that the end product, the food, is safe for consumption, and it's as per the requirement. Now, QA role comes under that. So the critical control points can be by heat, for example, or titration, the pH of a thing, or how much sugar that is, or how much salt that is. There are many parameters there are. So they are checks and balances that needs to be going for QA. So that's a daily activity that is done by an executive and manage the whole team by a QA manager or QA director, because depending on the size of the operation, if it's a small plant, you may not need 4 or 5 people. You may need 1 or 2 people with a R&D or QA manager that functions as an R&D, etc. like that. So that is the kind of example that I want to give for QA. It's in a factory setup mostly. Now for nutrition can be based in a university or in an organization. Even organizations these days, they have a nutritionist in store, where if you have a food product that you manufacture, the legal world or the food label needs to have certain amount of per serve, like recommended daily allowances, for example. According to the criteria, we got to meet those criteria. Nutritionists make sure the product that goes into the market complies to that. So per serving, how much of salt, how much of sugar, how much of protein, etc. goes into. It's an indicator for the consumer to know what they're supposed to have. And it's more like a disclaimer as well, that if you eat this product, make sure that one serving it'll have this much, to make your best choice as a consumer. That kind of thing. So nutrition pays. There's just an example of what nutrition does. So the nutritionist will actually influence research and development when they are developing the product, what to add, how much to add, etc. Because R&D new product developments can go crazy. They can go from A to Z all across the board. Nutritionist is one check where it will mention that the product is okay to go out into the larger world, actually, for to be commercialized. So that's the kind of function that QA, nutritionists, and R&D do. Any other questions?
All right. So we have some queries which I think we can take up right now. Someone has asked, does a person need to do engineering necessarily for food technology?
Oh, not necessarily. I think there's a bare requirement of science in class or in graduation in India, where you need to have at least maths, chemistry, biology, or physics. Like that. You need to have that and pass that, and then you have entrance exam, right? Depending on which university you're going. I've seen many people come from engineering side, like IIT as well. I've seen that. Most of us back then was you do your Bachelor of Science and you automatically move into Master of Science in food technology or food science, as you call it. These days, you have a lot of people moving between MBA and food science, marrying those two together, or you have engineering, like I said, even from the IT world as well. Because when you have a mix of those, you add value by having a very diverse, wider know-how and experience. So it's not limited, but I think the base requirements, you need to have a know-how on biology or science / chemistry. And obviously maths is a given. Math is compulsory.
Right. That is some useful information. So if we were to talk only about the technical category of the opportunities that are there available. So for that, what courses are there in the market currently?
Courses. Okay, food science back then used to be only in universities, larger universities, because you need a lot of lab work, etc. Now I think there are a lot of diploma courses as well, short-term courses. Now, if you're talking about only India, you'll have very short-term courses, and there are also workshops. Workshops like in CFTRI, for example, they give you like I think 2 weeks or 4 weeks on, say, flour milling, for example. Or there's a 2 weeks course on lipids and oils, for example. As and when they come up those workshops, it gives you an idea of, and you'll be focused entirely on that product. Say like lipids and oils, and everything will be talking about oils and how it's extracted, how it's processed, and what are those products that we can get out of it, and how do you manage oil across cooking oil, palm oil, etc. Right? All this stuff. So there are very focused workshops / diploma that is very short term, about a month or so, to 6 months to a year diploma courses as well, which is run by those similar institutes with trained professionals or experts. So those are there, but those give you an insight into food science and food technology, what you could do that. And most of the people who go there they have their own setup. They want to set up a factory. They want to set up a kitchen. They want to do something. They want to be entrepreneurs, would use that platform a lot. Or you would be working already in an organization and they've funded you to learn more deep about, for example, flour or oils or bakery or meat, fish, poultry. So there's a tie-up with an organization. So you have two sets of folks that take up the short-term workshops or diploma. Now, if you're an individual, you're a student and you want to pursue food science as one of the subjects or the main subject for your master's or Bachelor of Science, master's, and so on and so forth in the technical field, you will need to go through the university platform. And that's Master of Science. And these days, only Bachelor of Science doesn't work. You need to have a bare minimum Master of Science. And if you can do a PhD, these days PhDs can be anywhere actually. And for example, if you do it from the US or UK or down south, even New Zealand and Australia, these are like widely accepted and recognized universities are all over the place. So if you can do PhD, it adds two things to you. Your value in the market just catapults to a different level. And you also get a title doctor. Now that's a lot of, that's the future actually, because at some point, the organizations will start to accept only PhDs at some point, because back then, bachelor was okay when I was in 1900s. Now, if you look at it, the bare minimum cutoff is Master of Science. And going forward, PhDs. And then you have, I don't know where it's going to go from there, but this is where we are. At this point, Master of Science holds true.
All right. So talking about courses such as Masters in Science, I presume you're talking about Masters of Science in Food Technology and
Correct.
other such courses, right? So
Correct.
there's a question here. Someone is asking, they have done BSc Life Sciences.
Yeah.
So would it be a good choice for them to go for MSc Food Technology? So I think there are two parts to this question. Is that possible? Would the student be eligible? And second is that who should opt for this course, MSc Technology, Food Technology?
Okay. If you've done life science, now depending on what's in bachelor, if you're honest botany or zoology or chemistry, if you've done life sciences, you are eligible for food technology. Now, pure chemistry again, you're getting into Master of Chemistry and then engineering, etc. So your career will go accordingly. Now, who can come for food science? You need to, first, you got to believe yourself. You need to want it, because this is a very tight spot to be in, food science. It's not limited scope. It's actually very wide. The industry, I think, the food world is always going to be there, right? The processed food world is massive. Be it FMCG with the likes of Mars, Pepsi, KFC, for example, or Yum, PepsiCo, Mondelez, Unilever, and then even GlaxoSmithKline, they are Horlicks and stuff like that. I mean, like these are massive, massive companies like Nestle and stuff. So the opportunities are massive here, right? Now, you want to do food science, you have to be very clear. I know I know you are a student at class 11. There's a lot of things to ask. You have exams to clear and, to reach a certain stage. I think if you're doing Bachelor of Science in Life Sciences, you keep your option open to science now. Now to pick up either food technology or biotechnology or just plain chemistry, pure science, or plain botany, that's where you have to pick. And why do you want to pick that? You need to know that, or you need to talk to someone in the house or someone who's been there, why you want to do food technology. Is it that you want to work in the commercial world? Or you want to be an educator and pick up chemistry, for example, and be in a university, like I was talking about, be a lecturer, etc., and move up the ranks. That's an equally really good place to be in. And what else is there? Or do engineering, for example. So from life science, you do your chemical, and then you need to give your exams. You get into IIT, and it just broadens your entire, prospects. So, what kind of person can go into food science? Definitely, you need to be hungry for science. You need to be very inquisitive. You need to be willing to put in those, long hours in terms of working, studying hard in life sciences like botany, biochemistry, for example, maths. Maths is a no-brainer. You need to know. You need to have a good foundation on maths. So it's not about food science is the route to everything. No. You can take any of those, but then what you do next is you have to be very firm. You need to have grit, because there'll be ups and downs again. Because once you do your food science and you're in the working world, to get a job is not easy these days. You need to show what value you're going to add to them right at the beginning, which I had to do the same thing back then. There's nothing has changed as well. So again, there is no right and wrong answer here and who can go over here. It's about what your drive is. Do you want to be in this form? Do you want to be as an educator? Do you want to be an engineering and pursue IT with food science know-how? Because at the end, it's where you want to be. Your own business, you want to work in an organization, you want to be in a university, etc., for example.
Right. All right. So do we have any questions on this? Okay, so I wanted to ask for students who are currently in, say, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, and who are considering this option.
Right.
So what would be some of the skills that they could develop, or some of the qualities?
Okay. I think I have that in the next
All
slide.
right.
I'll just show you the next slide. Okay, 1 second.
Sure.
Yeah. Because that slide connects to what I was trying to tell you about. See, what positions you get in the food industry, technical head, VP, CEO, etc. I've mentioned that. The word I've put here is you, right? It all depends on you. I know there's a lot of pressure right now because you're class 11. I've been through that. I think the pressure back then and now is completely different. The competition is far more, bigger now. But there's one thing, however, there's one thing that it's going to make you not just stand out in the crowd, but it's going to add value to you personally. That's one thing is, remember, adapt. Now, you may take food science and you're studying, for example, in your bachelor, you're doing food technology, food science, and you think you're going the right way. And suddenly along the way, you're like, oops, I think I like MBA, for example. And then you're in loggerheads to, oh my God, I'm in the wrong profession, or I should be in this. It is going to come. I should have done biochemistry. Oh, I should have just gone botany and chemistry. It's going to happen, right? But the thing is, you could change, but you have to, there's always a price to pay. You pay with time, and then you change, and then you find, if you're lucky, oh, this is the right one, and you move on, you're lucky. And then you find or you could be in, oh my God, I should have stayed in the food science, for example. And then you're jumping back again. Now that's going to cost you time, and it's also it becomes hard to explain if you're shifting across, right? So adapting doesn't mean you're fickle-minded. Adapting is to be sure what you want to do and moving with that one, right? Staying true to the one. That requires grit. Okay, a lot of hard work, a lot of push from yourself. That's and adapt, grit. And second word I've used is stand alone. This is where you have to build the courage to be there and to believe in yourself that, this is what I want to do. Maybe you're confused now that which one should I pick up, which course to pick up. If your strength so far in class 10 and 11, and by now you can gauge yourself to a certain extent. Am I a person who is good with history and, arts kind of commerce, for example, or if I remember you have like English, etc. If you're more inclined towards that one, then maybe food science is not something you want to pick up. But if you've inherently, it's just tuned towards any aspect of science, like math, for example, or your biology classes, it's like, you find it more interesting and you're more adapted, you get the marks and, I'm not saying easily, but you've studied hard and you got it. Then, skew to a certain extent, it's very clear which way you should go. But there's some students which are like, maybe good on both. And now you're like, oh, which one do I take? Now, for that one, you need to have, you talk to your parents, talk to your friends. What should I do? You need to ask. Asking questions is the best thing you can ever do because no one knows everything. Everyone has little experiences here and there. Like you're talking to me, I have my own experience that I can share. You will have in your surrounding couple of minutes. Ask a question, make a call, pick a choice. And life is all about choices. From here on, you're going to choose everything, every step that you take. So adapt, stand alone. I jumped a bit. That's courage. You need to do that. You need courage to build that courage. You won't have it now, but you're going to build it as you go. You're going to build it. The third thing, the last one I want to say is empathy. Empathy revolves around yourself and how you treat others, how you see others, and how your relationship is going to be defined by that. And that plays a huge role in this world where networking, for example, knowing people across the board, that's very important. And how do you maintain that relationship? Remember I was talking about emotional stability or EQ or what do we call that? It's very important that, you don't lose your shirt straight away. You're not very abrupt. I'm not saying everyone is calm, but you think before you act. So if you have these attributes, those big positions or, sought after positions in any industry is there for you. It's there for the taking. Now, with that, with this power comes, it's the risk is higher. As you go up, the risk is higher. The responsibility becomes bigger. The stress you have to manage is always there. It will increase. Of course, with that comes compensation in terms of travel, in terms of, monthly salaries, etc., house, car, etc. And your life takes on, its own form. So, do I help you decide this? I think I can help you see this part of the world to a certain extent, but the decision has to come from you and only you. Is that okay? Or any questions on that?
Right, sir. So, you mentioned compensation. Could you tell us about the average pay for each of three of these categories that you have spoken about?
Depending on where you are and which country you are in, that's one. And depending on the type of organization you're in, all right? Depending on what contracts you sign, you'll see that, when you get the job, you're signing contracts. There's an agreement between organization and you. It's going to be everywhere. Now, let me give it an example. If you're working in a tax-free world, right? Like Middle East, they don't take tax. It's good, but all the money that you get is only you. So you pay off, rent, house, family, education, etc., all that stuff. And then you have some savings, for example. And in India, we are known for, save for the future. Now, as you travel across, you'll see many folks are not like that because people in the West, they're different. The way they grew up is different. People in Asia are different. So like that. Now, salary-wise, compensation-wise, what happens is there are many formats now. You can be a local contract hire, right? So for example, I'm here in Singapore. For example, I can be a local hire or an expat hire. Now, local hire is as per the local norms, as you would give a local package. So it will not include house, education, car, etc., etc. Then you come as an expat package, wherein all these are included: car, house, education for your kids, and you know, etc., etc., etc. Right? Both of them come at, remember, responsibility and risk is higher. Now, it all boils down to something called CTC, or cost to the company. Now, if you have, for example, the organization has hired you at a, say, 1 lakh a month salary, there needs to be a value that you need to add to that one, because that's what the company is paying. They need to get more or 10 times more than that out of that particular role, right? So usually in this market, if you see a technical head, depending on how large the organization can range, I've seen technical heads earn 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, to the tune of 8 to even 10 lakhs a month, right? Depending on where you are, what position you hold. Sitting in India, if you're managing the entire, as a global role, that's a huge responsibility. Along with it comes a lot of stress, a lot of accountability that you have to keep abreast of. Now, VP operation, technical head, they're almost all the same in that range you can get. Now, CEOs, etc., or chief marketing officers, for example, or the leadership team, it's not only about salary anymore, because we always focus about how much do you get in a month. There's something called shares, etc. There's always a percent of the profit that's given. So that's the contract that you sign off when you come at that. When you reach that level, you are signing off with the organization that, if I work in this position that you're offering me, I want 1% of the profit from this particular area. This is, for example, I want this, I want that, and then equally, that becomes a cost to the company. Equally, there'll be a value that you need to add into the system. It's exponential. So I think at this point, when you're class 10, 11, 12, I would not hang a carrot in front of you with, 2 lakhs a month. Oh, that's a big money. 2 lakhs a month, let me tell you, 2 lakhs a month in 1999, when I was doing masters, that is like a massive amount of money. Massive, massive amount of money. Unheard of. Today, 2 lakhs of money, 2 lakhs is maybe 2 flights. That's it. Right? So with all this inflation going on, the financial stability up and down, roller coaster ride, I would not put the carrot of financial gain at this point, but more so what you want to do with your life, in a sense. Is it food science that you want to pick up? Is it this? Is it engineering, etc., etc.? Do that, finish that course, but at the same time, be open by attending such things, courses, where they give you a view of the commercial world. What do you have to do to survive? One is surviving, and one is flourishing in that environment. So it's all about getting into the system. That's 1 foot through the door, survive it. And once I won't say comfort zone, because there's never a comfort zone, and then you flourish over there. That's where you climb. And that's where it happens. The magic happens where, you get into the zone, then you become technical head or VP of operations or presidents and CEOs, etc. happen, right? And note, not everyone becomes CEO, not everyone becomes vice president, not everyone becomes technical head. But again, if that's the aspiration, that's what you strive for. Okay? Right.
For that useful information. And now I think we've come to an end of the session, and now we'll take up some queries that we have received.
Okay.
Right. So someone asked, they're saying that food tech is a recent term, and is this because a lot of machines are more involved than before? And what does this have to do with packaged food market?
Oh, it has got everything to do with it, actually. Let me give you an example. The water bottle that you see everywhere, right? Aquafina, etc., etc. There is a shelf life mentioned over there. Think, will water ever expire? Or the shelf life is for the packaging? That's your answer there, right, for you. Think about it. That expiration date is for the packaging material, not the water. Well, we can argue that, but it's more for the packaging. So like that, when you say food, it's everything. So what you need to make that water, you need the equipment, the processing plant, for example. So that's evolving as we speak. There's a packaging industry, plastic, paper, etc., that you need to have to put those two together. And you need a food technologist to ensure that stays intact or marry nicely. And then you have a marketing person who will sell that product, who will design in such a way that the consumers will be like, okay, this is the one I want, for example. It's attractive. That's what you see the ads, etc. And then you have the salespeople. Make sure you get it in every corner of India or the globe. It's all encompassing, actually. So food technologist plays a certain portion. Engineering will play a certain portion, and everyone has its role in an organization.
Right.
Okay.
So one final question. Also, we'll wait for others to put their queries here in the chat box. So if you have any queries, you can ask here. Also, I have one question. What is your opinion on processed foods?
I think, let me answer that. I think that I get a lot of this question. What is opinion on processed food? See, processed food, fermentation. Let's talk about paneer. I think everyone knows what paneer is.
Right.
That's processed food. That's a form of separating the whey, then the curd, and that's what you get. Now, without curd, can you think of India food? Can you think of all the sweets that we get, the dairy sweets and rasgulla and all this stuff, for example? Never going to happen. So processed food is a must. For example, butter, ghee, alcohol, beer, wine, etc., cheese. That's processed food. Very important. Now, I know when you say processed food these days, it's like, oh, they add so many. Yes, over a period of time, what's happened is that cheese, it used to be natural cheese. It still is. It's expensive. So now to make it commercially viable, we started adding a lot of other oils, cheese, extenders, starters, fillers, etc. And so it's become more not like the original part, right? So that it's widely available for those people who can't afford, for example, in the daily meal. And it's also a forum to introduce fortification in terms of vitamins and minerals, etc., so that the larger population are healthy. And so that's a good part of food processing. Well, food processing also has its drawbacks in the sense, regulation-wise. The same cheese, if you put palm oil into it, is not cheese in the West, in Europe. But here, I think all the cheese slices, for example, it has palm oil or coconut oil at some point. So my view on it, it's necessary in our society to survive because the population is big, and to reach with all those people with the extended shelf life, I think it's very key to our survival.
Thank you so much for that answer. Very insightful. Yeah. So, do we have any more questions? I would request you to put them in the chat box. Otherwise, we will end the session.
Just a last note, anyone, you have my ID, if you class 10, 11, 12, I mean, like, you are at the point of, crazy decisions to make. If there's any way I can add value to your life, but through, you have questions, you can drop an email. If you're able to call, I'm in Singapore, you have my number. Do drop in a message. I'll be more than happy to swing by.
All right. So I have posted Mr. Vikram's email ID in the chat box. So please feel free to mail him for any further queries. So thank you, Mr. Vikram, for being here and for the very insightful answers to all our questions. And we would be glad to have you some other time there as well.
Sure.
And to all our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you in another weekly class very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much
for making this happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.